Nolan Wells bombshell. A witness tells us tonight, I went with Nolan's mother to the coroner's office, and this is what I saw. After leaving the coroner's office with the family, was there any concern that there had been foul play?
Since Nolan Wells died, something unexpected has happened. There are now two investigations unfolding at the same time. There's the official investigation involving law enforcement, medical examiners, and the evidence being gathered behind the scenes. And then there's the investigation happening online. Journalists, independent researchers, witnesses, and everyday people have been digging through audio recordings, photographs, social media, phone records, boat movements, and eyewitness accounts, all trying to answer one question. What really happened to Nolan Wells?
Accounts had absolutely nothing in them. From the relevant period, 4th of July, the day after, whatnot. The 24 hours was missing. Now, she found that especially suspicious because they recovered the phone less than 24 hours later when she expected recent Snapchat content to still be visible. As she stated, Nolan was constantly posting on Snapchat, so this is very odd that there is no video content, no pictures, no nothing. Now, further, Snapchat accounts had absolutely nothing, correct? This allegedly, on the ledge of allegedly looking down, would confirm that somebody tampered with his phone because Snapchat sends out holiday messages like Happy 4th of July, and that was not even there. Do you understand? So if his phone said Happy 4th of July and nothing else, then it would maybe be odd. Like, how did he not post all day? But it would maybe lead us to not be as suspicious as we are. But the fact that this Happy 4th of July message was erased, and Snapchat does this, they send you a message, leaves it in the incredibly sus category, and makes it even more valuable that the mother has subpoenaed CETO, all of these Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, everybody, WhatsApp, so we can get answers for what happened to Nolan Xavier Wells.
People said that y'all gonna stop coming for her. Y'all gonna stop talking about her because Katie is not the one. They said that Katie, y'all have y'all eyes on the wrong person, okay? Read all of these comments. Her people said that.
But here's the problem. Not everything being said about this case is true. Some claims have been confirmed. Some have been challenged. Some come directly from people who were there. And some are theories that have spread so quickly that people have started treating them like facts. So today on True Crime Uncovered, we're going through the biggest claims and developments surrounding Nolan's death. We're going to look at what has actually been confirmed, what remains unexplained, what the family is investigating, and what the internet may have gotten wrong. Because Nolan's family deserves answers. And if you believe the truth matters, type "I stand for truth" in the comments. Subscribe to True Crime Uncovered and turn on your notifications, because we're going through this case piece by piece. No assumptions, no rumors presented as facts, just the evidence, the questions, and the search for the truth. 2. Different people have described different parts of that afternoon, and investigators have had to reconstruct those final hours using witness statements, boat movements, GPS data, and other evidence. But online investigators have taken that one step further. They've begun comparing photographs, social media posts, boat passengers, timestamps, clothing, and even relationships between people online, trying to determine who was actually where. And some of those discoveries may be useful, but there's an important distinction we have to make. Finding a visual match is not the same thing as proving someone's location at a specific time. A photograph can tell us that two people were together. It does not automatically tell us where they were 5 hours later. And a social media connection can show that people knew each other. It does not automatically prove that they were together on July 4th. That's why we're going to look at these claims carefully. Because the question isn't simply, does this theory sound possible? The question is, what evidence actually supports it? Then there's the audio.
I have an update for you in the Nolan Wells case. Nolan Wells' family has hired an audio expert to clean up the CETO call from July 4th. And there's one part people are really zeroing in on, people who are watching about this. The dispatcher asks whether everyone is on board. The call appears to say,
all right. And is everybody on board in good health otherwise?
Yeah, everybody's
How
on
many?
board.
yeah, everyone is on board. That's what the caller appears to say. Now, some people are hearing that and saying that it conflicts with later accounts about Nolan being left behind on Horn Island. maybe, we don't know. We have to be careful here because we don't know exactly what the caller meant by everyone who they believe was on board at the moment, or whether that interpretation is even correct. So that's all speculation right now, but they are examining. They've hired a forensics audio person to deal with this, or an audio expert. For weeks, people online have been trying to solve this case by listening to muffled audio and deciding what they think it means. That's not enough. The experts,
And if the audio is eventually authenticated and that is confirmed to be what was said, then it is certainly something investigators would need to examine. But we have to slow down here. We don't know exactly what the caller meant by everyone. We don't know who the caller believed was on board at that exact moment. And we don't yet know whether every word people think they hear in that recording is actually what was said. And even if the words are confirmed, the meaning still has to be established by the rest of the evidence. Because audio can tell investigators what was said. It cannot automatically tell investigators what happened. And that distinction is extremely important in this case. Now, another major development came from Nancy Grace. Nancy Grace recently interviewed Josh Gill of the United Cajun Navy, who was involved in the search for Nolan, and his account gives us something important.
The
Morning, ma'am.
day unfolded when Nolan's body was found very bizarrely. You were there. I'm going to get to your trip to the coroner's office along with the family, but I want you to start at the beginning. What happened at the beginning of that day? We believe that Nolan likely died on July the 4th. Let's start with the day that Nolan's body was found and that you ended up at the coroner's office. Start at the beginning.
So early that morning, I deployed some resources. I deployed an aircraft, fixed-wing aircraft that wheels up at 0635, as you can see right there from the photographs. I was on my way to the Lake Mars boat launch. That's where the Tactical Operations Center was set up. And I received a phone call. Received that phone call from the Sheriff's Department that a body had been found. Didn't say who it was. I was probably 15 minutes out from the location. I then received a phone call within minutes after the conversation from the sheriff's office from Nolan's mother, Christine, and she was frantic. Again, that mother's intuition, she knew what was going on. So I'm meeting at the boat launch. I was there about 15 minutes ahead of time. Had
Hold on
conversations
just
with
one
the
moment.
sheriff.
Hold on.
Yep.
For those of you just joining us,
Yep.
Josh Gill is with us. He is the United Cajun Navy Incident Commander in the search for Nolan Wells. You stated that you received a phone call from Nolan's mother, Christine. You said she was frantic. What was she saying?
So again, I'm going to paraphrase. She said that they had found him, that they had found a body. My biggest concern at that exact moment was to make sure that she was safe, that she had, a safe way to get there, because it was the beginning of what's more than likely to be the worst day of her life. Again, so continuing on.
Hold on. Josh, you got me drinking from the fire hydrant here. Every word you're saying sparks 100 questions. So,
Sure.
Nolan Wells' mother calls you. Okay, where was she when she called?
She was en route to the boat launch as well. We were meeting there
Okay.
For the search.
Okay, had she been told that a body had been found?
Yet when she called me, so we had earlier communication, but via text, when she called me, she told me that a body had been found. She had been notified by the sheriff's department.
Oh, gosh. No wonder she was frantic. So she calls you. She's just been told by the sheriff a body has been found. She calls you. You're going to the boat launch. What boat launch? Where?
That's the Lake Mars boat launch.
Why there?
So that's where the operation was set up. That's where the search operations, the Tactical Operations Center was there. They had a mobile command unit, and the multiple entities and agencies were basing their operations out of there. So what it is a boat launch. Again, they could launch rather quickly. It's a protected area to launch and then make that run to Horn Island and the surrounding areas.
Okay, so you agreed with her. Did she ask you to meet at the boat launch?
Oh, she knew I was going to that boat launch, and she actually asked me that morning, early that morning, where we were going to meet. And I told her, here's the best place. Here's where the operation is beginning.
Okay.
It was a secured location by the sheriff's department. So, that's where they were running their operation on. And that's a common practice.
Question, do you know why Nolan's mother wanted you to go with her to Horn Island?
So we had communication. She called me, literally called me. We had a voice conversation that Sunday morning, about 7:00, 7:30. She had called and asked for some assistance. After that phone call, I asked to memorialize all of our conversations so I could go back and look at information. And that's not uncommon
What kind
for
of
families to
assistance
call
did
us
she
in that
need?
aspect. Find my son. There it is.
So she asked you to help find her son, that assistance. Okay, got it. Okay, go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, so she asked for that assistance, find my son, find Nolan. Started gathering information on who he is, who he was with, where he was. She made it very clear that he was with some friends, that they had been on Horn Island. So then I start launching resources immediately. And then
Okay,
after I
hold on
launched the
right there.
resources,
Hold on.
Yep.
Josh, what
Yep.
specifically did she say about him going to Horn Island with friends, if you can recall?
So she said that he went to Horn Island with friends. It's July 4th, and Horn Island's a location that's well known and well visited by people partying and hanging out for July 4th. It's a huge boating community, and that was the location where boats congregate and enjoy the 4th.
Okay, so she says he went to Horn Island on the 4th with friends. Got it, okay. So you meet at the boat ramp, and when you first saw her, what was her demeanor?
So she came to me. She gets out of the vehicle, comes to me, gives me a big hug. Again, it's a mother who her intuition is that her body was just found. So obviously sad.
According to what we learned,
and
the moment she gets out of the vehicle, she runs straight to you and is hyperventilating.
Absolutely. She came straight to
What
me.
happened?
20 people. She gives me a big hug and starts crying. And look, I'm a softie. I started crying with her. We literally sat in the parking lot on the ground in the gravel for probably 15 minutes. And we had some pretty deep discussions. She cried. I cried with her, and her husband was there as well. And I want to say this, that he's a very stoic individual, and he stood there with his hand on both of our shoulders and was a part of everything. It was one of those moments you don't forget.
What was she saying? What was she saying? I mean, in a moment like that, how do you console a mother, Josh, that has been told by this disembodied voice on the phone, we found a body? I mean, what was she saying? Did she not want to believe it was Nolan? Did she believe it was Nolan? At this point, she had not ID'd a body yet. Nobody had identified that this was Nolan. Was she holding out hope? What was going on?
She knew. Again, mother's intuition is strong. It's very strong. In her heart, she knew. As far as what she was saying, why is always the question, She asked God, why? And the rest of the conversations were just, memories real quick. And I'm assuming everything was just flashing in front of her eyes because, again, it's the beginning of the hardest time of her life. Losing her son. I was there just to console her and to help anyone I possibly could.
What was the dad saying, if anything?
He was, again, he was really quiet. He was a quiet gentleman, but his physical presence afforded hers, made her feel safe. And I will say that, he stood there with us, on the ground. He's there. And his presence said a lot, and it meant a lot to his wife, to Miss Christine. And again, that's a tough time for him as well.
So she's crying. You state that she knows deep inside that that body is her boy, her son. You start crying. Did you remain standing in the parking lot or did you sit down?
No, ma'am. Like I said, when she first came to me, she gave me a big hug, and I wrapped my arms around her, and we sat down. We sat very quickly. We remained seating for quite some time to have that discussion, say
On
a
the
prayer. I
parking
did
lot?
pray with her right there. Yes, ma'am. On the ground, in the gravel.
Y'all were sitting
Right.
on the...
Yeah.
And you said she was hyperventilating. You sit on the ground. I believe I heard you say that you started praying.
Always. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Was she
And the
praying that it
so
wasn't Nolan?
so and again, I'm paraphrasing and going from the best of my memory. Um, it was more of a prayer for peace and comfort is what I did. And I always ask for that and then for answers, and I prayed Godspeed if it is Nolan and, for the Lord to put his protecting hands over us and everything that we do and to be with this family and this mother, especially during these hard times. It's an emotional time.
I cannot even imagine. I'm trying to get my head around the picture of you and Miss Christine sitting on the ground in a parking lot with her crying after just been told we found a body and she knows it's Nolan.
Well, sure.
I thank God that you were there. I thank God that you and Nolan's dad were there to help her. I don't know how she even stood up. How did you get her to stand up?
So it was about 15 minutes we were there on the ground. And, a couple times the sheriff came up and he saw what was going on and the sheriff's staff, and they understood that it was one of those moments where we need some space. She finally, and I hate to say she called her composure because it was an emotional time for me as well as the father, and we stood up and the sheriff came over and, he started
Did you
discussing what the
help her
process
up?
would be. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
I don't know
Yes.
how she even stood up.
By the
Okay, so
grace of
you help
God.
her up off the ground. Yeah. Okay, then what happens?
So a family and friends started to arrive, and the security let them in, and the sheriff came up, and the sheriff again, um, he had to help deliver that news, that a body was found and do his formal, and I hate to say notification because at this point he didn't say if it was Nolan or not, um, but he explained that a body was found and where they would be bringing that body to. Um, and from there, the family gathered, and it was, I'd say, a matter of 15, 20 minutes, maybe. We were then escorted. Christine asked me to accompany them to the coroner's office, which I was extremely honored to do so. And then the sheriff's department escorted us to that coroner's office.
Can I ask you something, Josh? When the sheriff came over, was it the sheriff or a deputy sheriff?
It was the sheriff.
The sheriff.
He was.
He comes over
Yes, ma'am.
and formally tells her what she was already told on the phone. A body has been found. Had the body already been taken to the coroner's office?
It was en route. So he was en route to the coroner's office, and he told us, he told Christine, um, here's what's going on. Here's where you need to go for further information. And again, extremely professional, extremely polite. And the biggest word I can use was he was compassionate. His staff was extremely compassionate. I can't take that
How
away
was
from him.
she at that moment? Was she just numb? Did she ask questions or did she just stand there and take it? What was her response to the sheriff coming over face to face telling her we found a body? Because, a lot of times, this from all of the bodies that you have helped recover. Guys, joining me is Josh Gill. He's our special guest tonight with the United Cajun Navy. He's the incident commander, and he was in on the search for Nolan from the beginning, and he went to the coroner's office along with the family, along with the mother and the father. So when the sheriff was, I guess, formally delivering this to her, a lot of people, when they hear it on the phone, they don't want to believe it. I didn't. When it happened to me, I thought, did I get that wrong? So he comes up and tells her to her face, and there's no way to mistake what he's saying. He's right there in front of her. How did Miss Christine respond?
Just as any parent would respond. Tears, shocked, disbelief, I think are some good words. But again, I don't want to take away from the compassion and the professionalism of the sheriff's department at that point. And there were more people coming up, right? And at that point, the sheriff had conversation with the mother again, and the family, and just explained the process on what was going to happen next as far as where Nolan was going. And then moving from there. But I do want to add that, during these conversations, I reiterated to the mother and, Mr. Elmore, that Nolan will be treated with the utmost dignity and respect through the process. I wanted to explain that because that's something that parents always need to hear. Family members, that their loved one will be treated with dignity and respect.
So you guys make it to the coroner's office. What happens when you get to the coroner's office and Nolan's body is already there?
Correct. So we go to the coroner's office, we sit down. The coroner, he comes in, rather quickly, 10, 15 seconds once the table was filled with all the people, family members, friends, myself.
What table? Were you in a conference room?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. A conference room
gosh,
table.
At the medical examiners or coroners, everything is so sterile. And everyone I've ever been to.
So this was like an office conference room. You walk right in the door and there it was. Didn't really have that feeling of a coroner's office, if that's fair to say. More like a business office conference room. He walks in, very polite gentleman, very professional, well-spoken, soft-spoken as well. And, basically said that, they found a body, and from initial appearance, he identified him as Nolan. He did want to take a DNA swab or get a DNA sample from the family just for, further confirmation and for, I guess, record keeping, whatever it was. But then he also, she asked about the condition, and he went into, there were no immediate signs of foul play. Okay. To me, again, my opinion in hearing this is, no signs of blunt force trauma, or any, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, any, signs of foul play, what we would consider that.
Well, I guess they hadn't seen that big red mark on the back of his occipital yet, underneath the skin. And I take it at this juncture, Josh, his throat had not been dissected to look for potential subcutaneous bruising. So
Sure.
You're telling me that from a cursory look at Nolan Wells' body, there was no sign of foul play, such as a stab wound or a bullet wound or bruises, deep gouges on the head. That, in my experience, having tried so many homicide cases, I cannot count them, is what you get from a cursory look at a body. Would you agree?
So, correct. I'm not a medical examiner nor a coroner. I have gathered information and heard multiple people speak on that, especially about the red spot, right? We'll quote unquote call it the red spot. And as I appreciate that may be pooling or whatever, it could possibly be cellular decomposition. Again, I'm not a medical examiner or a coroner, but I do know what the coroner said at that immediate, that first meeting with him.
Let's get back to what happened in that conference room. So you're there, the mom's there, the dad's there, the coroner comes in, very calm, very soft-spoken, and tells Miss Christine that he believes it's Nolan based on physical appearance and description. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
What was her reaction? Because if it were me,
Again,
I would have been holding out. It's not him. It's not him. It's somebody that looks like him. I don't believe it's him. He's out there. If I can just get out of here, I can go find him. What was her reaction?
again, it was quiet, and it was a very emotional time for the family as well. I personally believe at that point she accepted that it was him.
Why do you
and
say that?
started
You must have observed something that makes you say that.
again, it just actions, and not denial, not beating on the table. It's not him. It's not him. Let's go. Let's keep looking. Um, and her being in the medical profession as well as I believe, a nurse practitioner. I think I will never say the word accept. She understood that what was being told to her. Right. Yeah. I'm
Was
not a
she still
parent.
crying?
I don't have any. Absolutely. She still cries to this day. And look, so I want to make this very clear to everybody that I support Christine in what she's doing. There's not a playbook that's written for a grieving mother who doesn't know what happened to her son. And I truly hope and pray every day,
Same.
as well as my organization does, that she finds peace and comfort, and she's able to accept
And you know what else, Josh?
whatever the results are.
I don't know
Yes.
how this would have unfolded if it had not been for the United Cajun Navy. I'm just putting that out there. For some reason, y'all have been
Thank you.
gotten so much hate, but you guys were out there at the get-go. You're the one that went with Miss Christine to the coroner's office. You were there. You're the one that helped her stand up off the ground when she was sitting on that pavement crying. That was you, United Cajun Navy.
Yes, ma'am.
I support her too, and my fondest dream is that we find out that this was an accident. But until we get to that point, this investigation must go on. So he comes in and tells her that. Then what happens?
So there were some questions, right? He asked the family if there was anything they needed to know. And I asked a question, and the question I asked was, can you please explain the process on where Nolan's going to go, what's going to happen from there? And he did. He explained that he would be going to the crime lab, I believe it was, on what was going on for further autopsy. Again, and I'm paraphrasing this. And we all understood it. We understood that what was going to happen, where it was going, and what would happen from there. Again, and I have to say this and reiterate this, that the family was in shock. I mean, it's horrible news to receive. I can't imagine it. I'm an empath, and I still can't possibly imagine how it feels to receive that information, that your son is no longer, here or with the family, no matter what the outcome is. Here's the issue, though, is that we have to be prepared to accept and understand what's told to us as far as results of the grand jury or whatever it is. I want to make sure that people understand the prayers for peace and comfort are there daily for this family as well as the nation, because this is a hard time for the nation and Ocean Springs in particular.
What happened then? You asked about the procedure. Let me make sure I understand this. The coroner identified Nolan based on description, because I've seen a photo, which we have not shown, of Nolan's body where it washed up. Well, I say washed up. That's really a term of art. I don't know that he washed up. I don't know how his body got right there, because it seems to me it was half in the sand and half in the water, right? So I don't know how it got there. That said, he made this ID based on the description given to him of Nolan, but wasn't the actual ID made from dental records?
So I don't know. I don't know what the actual ID was made from, if it was from dental records or if it was a DNA swab. He did discuss collecting DNA with the mother before we left. I did not witness
that.
Were you there
when the DNA was collected?
I was not. I don't know how they caught it, how they got it. But it was a discussion. But again, the coroner was confident, and his confidence level was high that was Nolan. And I think that's what Miss Christine wanted to do or wanted to understand. And the reason being, I think that there's that professional courtesy of, understanding he's a coroner, she is a nurse practitioner, and he wouldn't tell her those things if it was not in his heart.
Let me understand as I move forward in the questioning of Josh Gill, Incident Commander at United Cajun Navy, with Miss Christine Nolan's mother at the time she was taken to the coroner's office. Dave Mack, Crime Stories investigative reporter, very quickly, wasn't Nolan identified through dental records? That's a yes, no, please.
Yes, ma'am. He was identified with dental records.
To Jeff Gentry joining us. Jeff, thank you for waiting so patiently. Forensic certified bloodstain pattern analyst, crime scene analyst, death investigator, author of Forensic Science. Jeff, why did they have to use dental records to identify Nolan Wells' body?
Nancy, usually dental records are used when other forms of identification cannot be utilized. So the first thing that we always try to do is to visually identify somebody. And if you have family there or friends or an ID, something to reference to visually identify the person, then that is the first step. So just getting a general idea of who they are. Then you want to move to a scientific form of identification. And that is something based on a scientific discipline. So there is proof that it is the person when it goes to court, or additional questions are asked later. Your first form of scientific identification is fingerprints. That's always going to be the easiest and fastest. And if he had an ID or a driver's license, then there should be a fingerprint on file to be able to identify this person rather quickly. However, in this case, if he had been deceased for a day or two before he was found, then forms of scientific identification like fingerprints or even like a visual identification may not necessarily be available. So in those scenarios, then you move to alternate forms of identification like dental records. So that you would have to get the person's dental records from when they were alive to compare them against dental records taken when they're deceased at the autopsy. The last form of identification that's used, which is the most expensive and most time consuming, would be DNA. However, if you're going to take this case to court and it's going to be tried like a homicide, then you would probably want to use a form of identification like DNA because it's much more solid. You can verify with percentages how likely it is that the person is who you believe they are. So that's why dental records were most likely used in this case versus something simple and fast like fingerprints or visual identification.
Jeff Gentry can be found at evidenceoverassumption.com. Jeff, my takeaway from what you just said is they could not make a visual identification and they could not use fingerprints. You said those were the first two choices, then dental, then DNA. Why would they not be able to make a visual ID?
I'm assuming because he was outside and in the elements for a day or so. It's hot, it's July, it's very warm weather. However, in most cases where I have seen drownings where the person is underwater for a period of time, their body is pretty well preserved. Unless we're talking about like multiple days, weeks that this person is underwater, usually the water is cooler temperature. And if that person is face down in the water or completely submerged, their body is pretty well preserved until they surface. Usually a body after a couple of days surfaces. So I'm really surprised that he was on the shore. I've never personally investigated a drowning case where a person just ends up on the shore, especially if there's not a strong current or waves. Usually in bodies of water, the person will stay in pretty much the location where they go underwater if it's witnessed. They don't usually move around much after they have submerged or gone underwater. So to me, it's very concerning that he was on the shore or that his body surfaced that quickly. But that's what I am guessing is why they couldn't do an immediate visual identification with the family or even fingerprints. So I would really like to know more about the condition of the body. That's what I am assessing as a death investigator when I respond to a scene. So there should be a death investigation report from a death investigator who has experience looking at bodies and has experience examining these type of things to show exactly what his condition was when he was found. And if the body is decomposed more than what you would normally expect in a drowning case, that should be a big red flag. That's something that you definitely need to look into further.
So you're saying, let me follow up on what you just said. You find it odd that he was quasi on the shore. You also stated that location where the body is found is typically where they went under. You also said that the body must have been too decomposed to make a facial ID. I did not hear an explanation as to why fingerprint ID was impossible.
Fingerprint identification would be impossible if the hands were dried out to an extent where they can't be fingerprinted. Sometimes people that are underwater, or if the hands are underwater, the skin, just like if you're in the bathtub for a prolonged period of time, the skin ends up looking the same way. It just gets kind of wrinkled, and it's very hard to get a usable or workable fingerprint in those scenarios. So one scenario would be the body is too decomposed to get a fingerprint or a visual identification. And then the alternate scenario is the body or the hands were exposed to the water too long to where they just are not able to get a good workable print. So those are the different possibilities. But again, his position at the edge of the bank or partially in the water, that's really concerning because there's tons of people around that area. If he was in that position or on the shore decomposing for a day or so, why did nobody see him? Those would be my type of questions that I would ask if I were a death investigator responding to this scene.
Jeff, I'm looking right now at the photo of his body. And it's about, the beach is flat, and I would say it's about 3 to 4 feet from where there's nothing but sand, no water. It looks like it's at just as the water is starting, like you could walk in it very easily and your ankles may not even get wet. He's not out in the water at all. He's on the beach and on wet sand. That's the way to put it. It's wet sand. He's not out in the water, Jeff Gentry. What does that mean, if anything?
That's really abnormal. I would have a ton of questions in that case. I would wonder if there's no waves, no strong current, why is that body up on a shore? How did it get there? And just like when we're looking at blood evidence or other forms of evidence, if something is in a certain position within a scene, you have to question how it got there. I have investigated a lot of deaths, bodies in canals, rivers, lakes, large bodies of water, never really near the ocean to where you would expect somebody to wash up to shore. But in these cases, even though there's strong current, waves, large bodies of water, I've never really seen bodies up on a shore, especially up out of the water enough to where they could decompose significantly to where they can't be identified or can't be fingerprinted. So that would be a very big question that I would have in this case is, with the absence of waves, with the absence of a strong current, how in the world did this 19-year-old man end up on shore out of the water?
Josh, I'm going to pick back up with you and Nolan's family at the coroner's office, but you disagree with Jeff's characteristic. Explain.
Wind, wave, tides, currents. If you look, there's also there's some pictures, some aerial pictures that show driftwood way on the beach. Those four things are what impacted, as I appreciate, where Nolan ultimately ended up. If you look in one of those pictures, ma'am, a wave is about to come right over and crest right near where the body's at. So that shows that there is some wave actions and some currents. The winds, the waves, the tides, the currents have a huge impact on anything that's put into that water. It's known as the washing machine. It's a high tide, high current area. So that was the first things that I looked at whenever I saw that picture, and that is one of those pictures that I showed to the sheriff immediately as I received it. The stuff that's dark in that picture right there, I believe that's debris, and that debris could have easily or was washed up on that island. And if you look at the picture as well into the water, the white is that's wave action, either from wind, tides, or currents. So, and it's going towards the beach. When you walk down the beach and you find shells and you find, the bottle with the message in it, it gets washed up on the beach.
Okay, so I think in simple terms, you're saying you believe the body was washed up from the water to that location. Okay, and Gentry is saying Typically, a body is found where it goes in the water. So you're right. Tidal experts, water experts will have to determine that. I want to get back to you at the coroner's office. A dental exam was used to make the ID, which leads me to another question. If his face and his fingertips were so decomposed that they can't make an ID, then how do they know there was not bruising or there was not skin marks on his face, on his hands? That's a whole nother thing. You're not a medical examiner. I get it. But that's a question that needs to be answered back to you. The family, Miss Christine, the dad, were asked to provide DNA. Okay. You did not see the DNA taken, probably a buccal swab. What happened then?
So if I may add one thing, is I think that'd be a great question to ask the coroner is, how did he identify? Because he was pretty sure, in his best professional opinion, that was Nolan. And maybe he wanted the dental records just out of professionalism.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, isn't that one of the most definite ways to identify? Sure, and out of courtesy to the family, let's do it the easy way for you as well as to get the dental records. So moving forward, ma'am, we left. We went to the house. There was a gathering at the house, and the people started to pour in, and it was a very emotional time. Again, the family, the friends and family that were there they were extremely welcoming to myself. Todd Terrell also came he came within, I don't know, 30 minutes. We stayed there for about 30 minutes. We had conversation with the mother, Mr. Elmore, and some of the other family members and discussed a couple things with them. GoFundMe being one of them. And we wanted to assist with that as far as the development and helping to spread the word on that piece, as well as offer our services, and anything that we could possibly do to assist this family in this time of grief. We're there for them. Still there today. Anything that they possibly need, we're here to provide. If it's a shoulder to cry on, we're there. If she wants to get in an airplane or if she wants to get in a boat and go back out to Horn Island, we're there. We got it for her. She's been offered those services. We just want her to know and the family to know that we're there. We're 110% supportive because, again, there's no playbook on how to grieve the loss of a child.
Nolan's home, after leaving the coroner's office with the family, was there any concern that there had been foul play?
It really didn't come up. It just didn't come up. I think that whole grieving process, and it hit her hard when they got back to the house. At what point did potential foul play or the thoughts of foul play or the accusations come into mind? I don't know.
I think you're probably right that at that time she walks in, Josh, and she comes into a home where she knows her son will never be back in his room ever again. And when you see all the relatives and neighbors come in, it gets real. It's real.
It does.
And the pictures of Nolan are still
real.
out. I mean, all the family photos are there, and I don't know when it hits you that that's all you have going forward. That's it. Photos and memories. Photos and memories.
So, ma'am, if I can say one thing.
Please do.
I hear the emotion in your voice, right? I can hear it in your voice, and that's a sympathetic emotion for that mother, knowing that she has, at that point when she walked through that door, it became real, and it became the hardest day, the beginning of the hardest time of her life. Again, I pray every day for the peace and comfort. But ma'am, seeing that coming from you, and understanding the emotion behind it and what this lady's going through and what this family's going through and what the community's going through, it's very important. It's important to know that there's a lot of people that are extremely upset, and they lost a community member who was loved and cherished. So, it's a tough time for everybody.
Josh, did you speak with Nolan's mother again after that day?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We've had numerous conversations. And a lot. So we had conversation about a forensic pathologist, a secondary forensic pathologist. She wanted one. I gave her a recommendation that I got from somebody. She also discussed an attorney. She sent those messages as well. But the majority of our conversations, man, to be honest with you, were I'd send something to her, keep your chin up and your chest out and just know that you've got a lot of people that love and support you. I wanted to give her words of encouragement.
Josh
because
described
I know how
receiving
important
information
is
that
to
a body had been found. He then met Nolan's mother, Christine, at the Lake Mars boat launch. According to his account, Christine had already been notified by the sheriff's department that a body had been found. Josh described her as extremely emotional. He said they sat together in the parking lot, prayed, and eventually went with the family to the coroner's office. That gives us a first-hand account of what happened after Nolan's family was notified that a body had been found. But notice what this account does not establish. It does not establish how Nolan died. It does not establish whether foul play occurred. And it does not establish how his body reached the location where it was found. Those are separate questions. And then we get to another interesting detail from the interview. Josh initially described the coroner as being confident that the body was Nolan based on physical appearance. But later, when Nancy Grace asked directly whether Nolan was identified through dental records, Josh confirmed that dental records were used. That distinction matters, because saying that the coroner believed the body was Nolan based on appearance is different from saying that Nolan was scientifically identified through dental records. And according to the interview, dental records were ultimately used for the identification. So this is an example of why it's important to listen to the entire conversation instead of taking one sentence from an interview and building an entire theory around it. Then there's the question of the body's location. Nancy Grace also interviewed a forensic expert who questioned how Nolan's body ended up on the shoreline. The expert raised questions about whether the body's position was consistent with what he would normally expect in a drowning case. But Josh Gill offered another explanation. He pointed to wind, waves, tides, and currents. He described the area as one where those forces could move objects through the water and eventually onto the shoreline. And again, we have to separate interpretation from fact. One expert's concern does not automatically prove foul play. And one person's explanation does not automatically settle the question either. The location of the body is evidence. What investigators have to determine is how that evidence fits together with everything else. How did Nolan enter the water? Where did he enter? What were the conditions that day? What were the currents and tides doing? How long was he in the water? And could those conditions explain where his body was ultimately found? Those are questions that require evidence. Then there is perhaps one of the most discussed medical questions in the case. The red markings beneath Nolan's skin. People have pointed to these markings and asked whether they could indicate some kind of injury. Others have suggested that they could have another explanation, including post-mortem changes. But again, a mark is evidence that requires interpretation. It is not automatically evidence of homicide. The important question is what qualified forensic examination determines those markings actually were. And that is why the independent forensic examination and the official findings matter so much. Then we have another major claim circulating online. Nolan's phone. According to statements attributed to his mother, some messages appear to be missing from Nolan's phone, and his Snapchat accounts reportedly did not contain the expected content from the relevant period.
Secret Service Sam here with a Nolan Xavier Wells update and something very interesting we have figured out. Nolan Wells' mother, Christine Wansley, said that when her family recovered his phone and checked it, some texts appeared to be missing, right? And his two Snapchat accounts had absolutely nothing in them from the relevant period, 4th of July, the day after, whatnot. The 24 hours was missing. Now, she found that especially suspicious because they recovered the phone less than 24 hours later when she expected recent Snapchat content to still be visible. As she stated, Nolan was constantly posting on Snapchat, so this is very odd that there is no video content, no pictures, no nothing. Now, further, Snapchat accounts had absolutely nothing, correct? This allegedly, on the ledge of allegedly looking down, would confirm that somebody tampered with his phone because Snapchat sends out holiday messages like Happy 4th of July, and that was not even there. Do you understand? So if his phone said Happy 4th of July and nothing else, then it would maybe be odd. Like, how did he not post all day? but it would maybe lead us to not be as suspicious as we are. But the fact that this happy 4th of July message was erased, and Snapchat does this, they send you a message, leaves it in the incredibly sus category, and makes it even more valuable that the mother has subpoenaed CETO, all of these Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, everybody, WhatsApp, so we can get answers for what happened to Nolan Xavier Wells.
Online commentators
no
have interpreted this as
peace.
possible evidence that someone tampered with his phone. And I understand why that would raise questions. If someone normally posts frequently, and suddenly an entire period appears to be missing, people are naturally going to wonder what happened. But again, there is a major difference between suspicious and proven. Missing data can be suspicious. It is not automatically proof that somebody intentionally deleted it. To establish intentional deletion or tampering, investigators would need digital forensic evidence showing what was deleted, when it was deleted, from what device or account, and potentially who had access. That is why the subpoenas and requests for digital records could become important. Because the question isn't simply whether something appears to be missing. The question is, what do the underlying records show? Then there are Nolan's personal belongings. People online have been asking about his shoes or slides, his necklace, and other personal items. These are legitimate questions to ask. But we need to be careful about what we do with those questions. Not seeing an item in publicly released evidence does not necessarily mean that the item disappeared under suspicious circumstances. The important questions are, was the item recovered? Was it documented? What was Nolan wearing when he was last seen? What did investigators find when his body was recovered? And are those items accounted for in the official evidence? Until we have those answers, saying that someone must have removed them would be speculation. Then we come to one of the biggest online investigations surrounding this case. The boats. Who was there? Who was on which boat? Who left the island? Who stayed? And were there other people who may have witnessed what happened? Online investigators have attempted to reconstruct the people who were present using photographs and social media connections. They have compared swimsuits, hair, necklaces, sunglasses, cups, photographs, and social media relationships. Some of these discoveries could potentially help identify witnesses or establish connections between people. But we should not turn an internet reconstruction into a confirmed passenger manifest, because a photograph proves a photograph. A social media connection proves a social media connection. Neither automatically proves where someone was at a particular moment on July 4th. That is where GPS data, photographs, witness statements, boat records, and other evidence have to come together. And when they do, that's when a theory can potentially become evidence. Then the case moved into another territory. Legal threats. Public commentators have discussed threatened defamation claims involving people who have publicly questioned the circumstances surrounding Nolan's death. That has created a lot of discussion online about what could happen if a lawsuit were actually filed. But once again, we need to distinguish what has happened from what people think could happen. A threatened lawsuit is not the same thing as a filed lawsuit. And a lawsuit is not automatically an investigation into Nolan's death. Whether legal action actually proceeds and what information could be obtained through it depends on what is actually filed and what a court allows. So where does all of this leave us? It brings us back to the two investigations. The official investigation has access to things the public does not. Forensic examinations, digital evidence, GPS data, interviews, medical records, autopsy findings, and evidence that may never become public. The online investigation has something different. Thousands of people looking at the same photographs, videos, statements, and public records from completely different angles. And sometimes that can uncover a question investigators need to answer. It can point people to a photograph, a witness, a timeline discrepancy, a piece of audio, a boat, or a piece of information that deserves a closer look. But the online investigation also has a danger. It can create certainty where the evidence doesn't yet exist. A theory can be repeated so many times that eventually people stop calling it a theory. And that is exactly what we have to avoid. A theory can be worth investigating without being true. So let's separate this case into 4 categories. What is confirmed, what has been reported or disputed, what remains unverified, and what we simply don't know yet. We know Nolan went to Horn Island. We know GPS data places the boat there. We know the boat eventually left the island. We know Nolan did not return with the group. We know his body was later found. And according to the Nancy Grace interview, dental records were used to identify him. Those are important facts. Then we have a disputed or unresolved questions, the exact circumstances surrounding Nolan's final hours, the interpretation of the CTO audio, the movement of his body through the water, the meaning of the red markings, the circumstances surrounding the missing digital content, and exactly who was where during the critical period. Then there are claims circulating online that remain unverified, that someone deliberately deleted Nolan's Snapchat, that specific people were definitely on specific boats based solely on social media evidence, that particular individuals caused Nolan's death, or that evidence was deliberately destroyed. Those are much more serious claims. And serious claims require serious evidence. Finally, there are the questions we still don't have answers to. Exactly what happened to Nolan after his final confirmed sighting? Exactly how did he die? Exactly how did his body reach the location where it was found? What will the complete forensic evidence show? And what will the digital evidence reveal, if anything? Those are the questions that matter. Because another TikTok theory won't solve this case. Another blurry photograph won't solve it. And another person listening to the same audio and hearing something different won't solve it. The answers will come from evidence that can be authenticated. Digital records, GPS and boat data, forensic findings, witness testimony, medical evidence, and information investigators can independently verify. Because the biggest question isn't whether the internet can come up with another theory. It's whether that theory can survive the evidence. This is Real Crime Uncovered. If you want me to keep separating what is confirmed from what is speculation as this case develops, let me know in the comments. And if you believe Nolan's story deserves to be examined carefully, subscribe to Real Crime Uncovered and turn on notifications. Because this case is still developing. And we're going to keep following the evidence, not the noise.